What happened, Bhajan?
हे एवढंच आहे बहुतेक.
काय आवाज आलाच नाही तुझ्या कसलाही.
अच्छा,
नो साऊंड.
ओके. मला येत होता.
आवाज कमी केला, किती आवाज कमी.
तुम्हाला किती वाजले बंद करा ना.
बाकी जण ऐकायला आलं का?
खूप कमी केला आवाज.
एक मिनिट. हा,
आता तुम्ही पूर्ण ऐका.
नाही नाही नाही, कोणत्याही परिस्थितीत नाही.
मग आवाज कमी करा, आवाज चालू करा, या ऐका.
नाही.
बगवी छाटी माळ गळ्यात, बगवी छाटी माळ गळ्यात, शांत दया
बंद केला.
शांत दयाळू श्री गुरुनाथ, बगवी छाटी माळ गळ्यात, पायी खडावा चुट चुटती, पायी खडावा चुट चुटती, नेत्र करारी ते दिसती, नेत्र करारी ते दिसती, उपदेशामृत पारुन जनहित, उपदेशामृत पारुन जनहित, मार्ग भक्तीचा दाखवितात, मार्ग भक्तीचा दाखवितात, शांत दयाळू श्री गुरुनाथ, शांत दयाळू श्री गुरुनाथ, भगवी छाटी माळ गळ्यात, शांत दयाळू श्री गुरुनाथ, पायी खडावा चुट चुटती, नेत्र करारी ते दिसती, उपदेशामृत पारुन जनहित, मार्ग भक्तीचा दाखवितात, शांत दयाळू श्री गुरुनाथ.
ओ ओम सहना भवतु, सहनौ भुनक्तु, सह वीर्यं करवावहै, तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं, नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। चिन्मयो नाम रूपस्य आनन्दो वै स्वभावतः, वेदगीता समुद्धर्ता ज्ञानयज्ञव्रते स्थितः, चिन्मयं जीवनं यस्य स्मरणं यस्य चेतना ज्ञानदानं धृतिर्यस्य तस्य पादौ भजाम्यहम्। त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव। भज गोविन्द भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते सम्प्राप्ते सन्निहिते काले नहि नहि रक्षति डुक्रीकर्णे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं जटिलो मुण्डीलुञ्छितकेशः काषायाम्बरबहुकृतवेषः पश्यन्नपि च न पश्यति मूढः युदरनिमित्तं बहुकृतवेषः भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम् अङ्गङ्गलितं परितं मुण्डं दशनविहीनं जातं तुण्डं वृद्धो याति गृहीत्वा दण्डं तदपि न मुञ्चत्याशापिण्डं भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम् अग्रे वह्नि पृष्ठे भानु रात्रौ चुबुकसमर्पितजानु करतलभिक्षस्तरुतलवासः तदपि न मुञ्चत्याशापाशा भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम् कुरुते गंगा सागर गमनं व्रतपरिपालनमथवा दानं ज्ञानविहीनः सर्वमतेन मुक्तिं न भजते जन्मशतेन भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम् सुरमन्दिरतरुमूलनिवासः शय्याभूतलमजिनं वासः सर्वपरिग्रहभोगत्यागः कस्य सुखं न करोति विरागः भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम् योगरतो वा भोगरतो वा संगरतो वा संगविहीनः यस्य ब्रह्मणि रमते चित्तं नन्दति नन्दते नन्दत्येव भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम् भगवद्गीता किञ्चिदधीता गङ्गाजललवकणिका पीता सकृदपि येन मुरारिसमर्चा क्रियते तस्य यमेन न चर्चा भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दं गोविन्दं भज मूढमते। हरि ओम फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम to the Meera Satsanga. We are discussing Bhaja Govindam with the help of Swamiji's commentary. We have covered 20 verses so far, and last time or the 28th hour was covered, having 12 paras, and the last statement that we discussed. The last statement that we discussed was important statement. When a seeker through the process of yoga has transcended these three vehicles, he rises above the realm of change, a realm where infinite existence alone is. So that way, since he has changed the level from BMI to consciousness, therefore the realm is changed, and the realm is such that the infinite where the Yama has no access immediately. His job is different, and therefore he is not accessible in this new region. He has no entry or access. Therefore, there is no question of questioning the seeker about at the time of death. The seeker has already identified with the infinity in him. So that was our last discussion. Is there any point that is left out still to be discussed before we proceed to the 21st? Is there anything anyone would like to contribute anything? Or anything left out? No. So we'll proceed to the verse number 21. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam, iha samsare bahudustare. इह संसारे बहुदुस्तारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे पुनरपि जननं पुनरपि मरणं पुनरपि जननी जठरे शयनम् इह संसारे बहुदुस्तारे कृपया पारे पाहि मुरारे भज गोविन्दं भज गोविन्दम्. Again birth, again death, and again lying in mother's womb. This samsara process is very hard to cross over. Save me, Murare, O destroyer of Mura, through thy infinite kindness. Seek Govinda, seek Govinda. The wheel of birth and death is never at rest for the jiva. The individualized ego, prompted by desires, entertained by his imagination, and cultivated by his habits, but not yet completely fulfilled, must seek ever fresh fields of experiences repeatedly in each lifetime. Instead of exhausting the existing desires or vasanas, each one gathers to himself a new set of vasanas. We come here for purgation, but due to our ignorance of the way and the goal, the extrovertedness in us compels us to get ourselves attached to the objects which have a beauty and a charm created by the imagination of our mind, Maya at work. This in short, much is packed in the short para. It was A starting statement is worth our discussion. The wheel of birth and death is never at rest for the jiva. So the jiva means the one who is subjected to the wheel of the rotation of birth and the death in a continuous manner. Like Gita says that Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janmam mritasya cha. The one who is born is bound to die, and one who is dead is bound to be born again. So this is going on. Now this is never at rest for the jiva, is the first statement. How do we understand the jiva, the word jiva, and the wheel of birth and death never at rest for him? We have to define first the jiva and then see why it is applicable to him.
जीवो जानाति
Hmm.
इच्छति यतते च. So he keeps on knowing, then desiring, and his desires, if they are not fulfilled and ended, then again next birth to fulfill those desires.
So jivo janati, please comment more on this. What he knows, jivo janati.
Because his contents are consciousness, he is conscious of everything around him. And that conscious of everything may be real, unreal, or whatever is as per his knowledge. He tries to understand the surrounding and about himself. But because his contents are consciousness, he is conscious of everything.
Now we are defining jiva to understand why the wheel of birth is never at rest for him.
He is at the body level, and birth and death is for body. He identifies with the body, so he goes along with the body's birth and death.
So what is the main characteristic behind all this description?
The egoistic individual.
Egoistic
ESTI.
individual is the next statement. Don't jump on that. Try to capitalize on that. We are trying to understand the jiva first. So Moini has the definition janati ichati yatate. Then we have a question about janati. And then I ask, what is the main characteristic of jiva? The individualized ego, etc. This is something next. We are basically the basic characteristic of the jiva.
Avidya.
Avidya. That's what the answer is. Basically, he is ignorant of his true nature. This defines jiva. And therefore, when one doesn't understand, then he tends to misunderstand. So the misunderstanding is that he is the BMI, body, mind, intellect. So then they have a beginning and an end. Body from the birth to the death is available for operating only in the waking state. The mind is available in the waking and dream, but is lost in the deep sleep state. And in the deep sleep state, none of these equipments are present or active. So So that which is subject to change continuously is body, mind and intellect, not the jiva. Jiva as an individual is present in all the three states, waking, dream and deep sleep. And he gathers his experiences of all the three states. Therefore, he is not subject to change. He is the same fellow, same individual. While the dream, perceiver, feeler, thinker, waker, dreamer, deep sleeper, they keep changing their roles. But the individual behind them all is common and is existent throughout 24 hours a day. So the first thing is that he is ignorant. Now when he is ignorant of his real nature, then something else works on him. What is that? Just now we have answered earlier.
Desires.
When he is ignorant of his true nature, then the next
His nature is full, complete, but he is not aware of that. So he keeps on desiring because he lacks something, he feels. And then desires are there.
So first of all, not knowing one's nature is the influence of
Avidya.
avidya. Did you say vidya?
No, avidya.
Avidya. So the first is avidya, avidya maya, which has an influence on him, which makes him forget his true nature. Thus, ignorant of his true nature, then his fullness, etc., everything is forgotten. Therefore, he succumbs to or he yields to the vasanas, which is the other side of ignorance. Avidya, vasana. These are the two sides of the same coin. The ignorance of our true nature gives rise to the desiring, wanting sense, and thus he desires. So now a fulfillment of desire gives him some happiness, some pleasure. But whether that is the way, he doesn't know. So he keeps on entertaining desire. And now when the desire is in his attempt to fulfill the desire, few more desires crop up. So when one desire, vasana or desire is exhausted, in its place 10 more come. So thus it is, he is instead of reducing the desires, he is increasing the desires. Then what happens? When the desires are more, even when his life is ended, still the desires still remain. And therefore that causes for another birth, so that he has to exhaust the balanced desire. So every time, instead of exhausting his existing desires, he gathers more desires. And therefore the wheel of birth and death is never at rest. So there are always some extra desires which are ensuring the next birth, further birth. So this is the first starting point, and therefore this is the first comment on punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatare chena. So this is all, the wheel of birth and death is continuously on in case of jiva, who is ignorant of his true nature and therefore identifies with the desire, which shows the sense of wanting, sense of lacking, etc. And then he thinks that by fulfilling the desire, he will be happy. And that goes on. So the wheel of birth and death is never at rest for jiva. Now the explanation follows, but we tried to discuss independently of further explanation. And now it is said individualized ego. We have been saying egoistic individual. It is one and the same. Whether you make ego more prominent than the individual or the individual, there is an alliance between the individual and the ego. Ego is one of the vrittis in the inner equipment, and individual is a reflection in the equipment, in the inner equipment of pure consciousness. Therefore, this reflection as jiva, the individual, and his association with ego, therefore it is called individualized ego. The ego which is identified with individual, but what I thought was the individual who identifies with the ego. And ego has already identified with the desire. Therefore, he is concerned with the desire and its fulfillment, the egoistic sense. And the ignorant jiva finds that this game of fulfilling the desire is very useful to him in order to get the happiness. Therefore, he has alliance with the ego. So he becomes an egoistic individual. Individualized ego means the ego thought has identified with the jiva or the individual. So now this individual ego, prompted by desire, entertained by his imagination. See, there are three reasons why this game is continued. First is the presence of individualized ego. Second is prompted by desires. It is the desires who prompt the individualized ego. So desires create a desirer of desires. Kama kami is created. Already egoistic sense is there with the individual associated with it. Therefore, when the desires appear in the intellect, immediately they are identified by the egoistic individual or individualized ego. Then they are prompted by desires. Now the ego is prompted by desires. Moment the desires appears in the mind, the ego identifies with it and says, yes, I want to fulfill the desire. Therefore, he becomes kama kami, the desirer of desire. Once he has identified with the desires, so in other words, the desires prompt the ego, as it is described here, prompted by desires, then entertained by his imagination. So when the desire appears, he imagines that this desire should be welcome because in its fulfillment I will feel happy. And therefore he can be the next description is prompted by desire, first one. The next is entertained by his imaginations. So by his mind's imaginations, the desires are welcome. They are encouraged. So whatever has appeared is encouraged by mental imagination that this is going to make me happy in its fulfillment. Therefore, I should fulfill the desire. So he welcomes the desires. That is how prompted by the ego, prompted by desires. Therefore, the ego welcomes the desire, and then this desire is further entertained by the ego, imagined by the ego, and further cultivated by his habits. So much is further process on desires. First is the imagination. Desires have already prompted the ego to be concerned about desires. So we become the desirer of desires. And now he has already, his mind has imagined the would-be happiness that it will be getting when this desire is fulfilled. So this is his imagination, that every desire will make him happy. So this is prompted by desires and entertained by his imagination, and further cultivated by his habit. His habit of entertaining the desire, welcoming them, and imagining the would-be happiness that it will be deriving from this desire fulfillment, all this has now become the habit, because day in and day out the desires will appear as per the law. The vasana, the unmanifest, will become manifest as desires in the intellect. So when the desires are manifest, then the ego attends to it, identifies with it, welcomes it, and the mind imagines the would-be happiness. So this imagination. And mind has got a habit of forming a habit. It is the nature of the mind to form habit. So this is further, here it is mentioned as the cultivated by habit. Imagination and cultivation is something added to the existing natural desires. Sahaja vasana. There are natural desires because we are born with it. We are born with the vasanas, which in time appear as desires, manifest as desires. So this is something natural. And this is welcome. Further, it is imagined by the mind, cultivated by the mind through habits. It has already formed the habit that all desires are to be welcome because they have potential happiness in them when fulfilled. So see how it is, the inner system is being now worked for the desire fulfillment program. The ego welcomes it, welcomes the desire, and then his mind imagines about this desire fulfillment. Then mind cultivates the habit of entertaining such desires continuously. So it becomes a habit that every desire is being imagined over and looking forward for its execution. All this is the mind play through cultivated habit. So mind has got this habit of forming a habit. Anything that comes across, mind comes across, it tends to make a habit. So this is the tendency of the mind, and accordingly the habits are formed in cultivated. See, the cultivation word is important, and cultivated by his habits. First thing is the vasanas are original, therefore we call it as the sahaja vasana. Sahaja means along with, born along with vasanas. Saha jayate, sahajam. So the jiva is born along with vasanas. Therefore, they are called as sahaja vasana. Now, these vasanas are something natural with which he is born. So it is bound to manifest at given time and place and demand for its fulfillment. And in the process or the system, it may be fulfilled. It is designed to be fulfilled. But the ego is specially, he is prompted by desires, meaning he is influenced by the desires mainly. When he is influenced by the desires, ego has already got association with the mind, and therefore this unholy alliance with the mind, and therefore mind is also, what is that, next one is mind also imagines the would-be happiness when we entertain the desire, fulfill the desire, etc. So this is imagination. And cultivated by habit. Mind's habits make the desire which is original or natural as cultivated further because of the habits and recalling again and again even before fulfillment, it becomes as though a cultivated desire. As such, when he has few more desires, they are called cultivated desires. And this is called this Sahaja Vasana or natural desire. So we have in our mind two types of desires. One type of desire is called as Sahaja Vasana, and this is natural because we are born with it. Therefore, it's a natural desire. Vasana is another alternative. Vasana is unmanifest desire. It's called Vasana. Manifest Vasana is called as desire. So now, when the desire appears in the intellect, the mind gets agitated, becomes restless, starts imagining the would-be possibilities of gaining happiness, etc., and thus tries to uh, recall again and again, and thereby cultivate the through habit this desire. So as such, desire is bound to get through process fulfilled. But because of the egoistic intervention, mental imagination, etc., the process becomes complicated. Now it is not sure whether the desire will be fulfilled. As such, the program is meant for fulfilling the desire only. But provided the process is allowed to take place in its own accord. But here what happens, the moment desire occurs, the desirer of the desires, the egoistic individual, he wants it. He longs for it. We have seen the difference. He is, longing is one word. Another word is the yearning for desire. Yearning for desire. So the ego yearns for the desire or longs for the desire. This is added to it. Already there is no question of longing. You have already longed it. Therefore, the desire, it has been in the form of desire, and in time the desire will appear for the fulfillment. But he again longs for this desire and thereby involves himself in the process, and that makes the obstacle or disturbance in the process. The desire would have been activating the mind, and through physical activities, the desire would have been fulfilled and gone for the good. But now, since the ego has welcomed it, and the mind is imagining and forming a habit of recalling this desire and wanting to fulfill it, therefore now it is not just the natural desire. It is further a concern of the ego, and the mind is looking forward for its fulfillment. So by imaginations, it is trying to recall again and again, thinking on the desire fulfillment fire. So thus it becomes a habit of the mind to entertain such desires through imagination. This is another operation. First operation was of ego, second one is of mind. They are already associated, unholy alliance. And now the next is, but not yet completely fulfilled. How would you like to interpret this? So must seek ever fresh fields of experiences repeatedly, but not yet completely fulfilled. How do you interpret this? complete fulfillment. And that's the reason further it is added, must seek ever fresh fields of experiences repeatedly. No desire fulfillment gives us total satisfaction. Any desire that is fulfilled will give a temporary satisfaction. And again, it will be replaced by a few more desires, and therefore we remain again incomplete. The presence of desire shows a sense of incompleteness on our part. That means unless this desire is fulfilled, I am not full and complete. But the experience tells us that any fulfillment of desire does not make me totally satisfied. Most important thing. Therefore, here it is mentioned that yet not yet, but not yet completely fulfilled. No desire is capable of completely fulfilling the individual. So there is no sense of total satisfaction on the part of individual, and therefore what he says, what he does, that experience and goes through the temporary satisfaction when the desire is fulfilled, and then again seeks new fresh fields for entertaining few more desires. Therefore, no desire is capable of totally satisfying the individual. This is a sense suggested here in this clause when it is said that but not yet completely fulfilled. So this whole thing is related to the individualized ego. The individualized ego never feels totally satisfied. It's a long sentence with so many clauses. The main clause, main subject is the individualized ego. It's prompted by desire, entertained by his imagination, cultivated by his habit, but not yet completely fulfilled. In spite of so many factors, always cultivating them and supporting them, in spite of all that, in case the desire is fulfilled, it does not give us total satisfaction. This is important. But not yet completely fulfilled. That means the individualized ego doesn't find a total satisfaction when a given desire is fulfilled. No desire, when fulfilled, gives him the total satisfaction, completely fulfilled. So the fulfillment is only temporary on fulfilling the given desire. When the desire is fulfilled, then he finds a temporary fulfillment, and again he is back to square one, and therefore he seeks ever fresh fields of experiences repeatedly. The experiences of what? Of desire fulfillment. Therefore, he has to seek the new fields for the possible desiring and its fulfillment. So now, as a result, in each lifetime, instead of exhausting the existing desires of vasana, each one gathers to himself a new set of vasanas. Each lifetime, the entire life is spent like this, that a natural desire comes, mind further works on it, ego welcomes it, cherishes it, wants or longs for it, then the mind imagines the would-be possibilities of happy moments or experience, and then it cultivates this desire. When it repeatedly brings to its mental vision the would-be fulfillment of this desire, and how it will be happy, etc. These are all imaginations of the mind. And so the mind imagines, and by repeatedly cultivating this desire before fulfillment, it is gathering as new desire. So because when the desire is allowed to go and get fulfilled, that's a different case. But even before fulfilling it, the ego welcomes it, especially concern about it, desirer of desire. Then the mind imagines and starts all varying possibilities of fulfillment of desire, and thus it cultivates the natural desire is being cultivated by mind's imagination and the would-be possibilities, etc. So this is adding in the bargain. The mind is imagining when the desire is fulfilled. Since it does not give us the total satisfaction, we are again looking out the fresh fields for fulfilling the desire. And thus, instead of exhausting the existing natural desires, the mind gathers few more, supported by the ego or individualized ego. The individual gathers to himself more desires instead of exhausting the existing. So this is the analysis well given, and therefore this causes the new birth, because if there is already sanchita karma, which is in parcels of prarabdha karma, is allotted to every life. Now this life is complete, but while spending this life, instead of allowing this natural desires to fulfill themselves, the ego, these terms that are used are very, very important terms, very scientific terms, and they prompt the sense properly. So here, in case of ego, it's prompted by desires. So desires encourage the ego to be concerned about it. The ego is interested in the desire. So he becomes the desirer of desires, as we have already seen in Gita. And then when it comes to mind, which is always associated with the ego alliance, it gives a further imagination. Imagination is something other than what is happening or what are the facts about the the chain of happening in processing the desire. Mind has its own imagination, and then thereby through such imagination, mind is trying to cultivate this desire. This cultivation is not necessary. The desire as such would be, if allowed, would be fulfilling itself at an appropriate time and situation. But because of the intervention by the ego, imagination by the mind, and further cultivation, it gives rise to new desire. Even if the present desire is fulfilled, by the time it is fulfilled, already due to this cultivating habit of the mind, already few more desires are cultivated, and therefore in the place of fulfilled desire, he gathers more. Now this present life is meant for exhausting the natural desires, not cultivated desires. We are making these two types of desire, the natural desire and cultivated desire. So in this life, while we are exhausting the existing desires, their fulfillment, etc., and gathering experiences about them, simultaneously we are entertaining two more desires. This is additional lot of desires, which is not planned for this life. But during this life, mind has cultivated, and thus this additional desire becomes the reason for another birth. So the existing program of Prarabdha and the Sanchita has so many lives. And this fellow is adding to that life another life because of his added desire. You know. So the cultivated desire, mind is responsible for it because it takes active part in him through imagination and cultivation. When a natural desire has its own course and gets exhausted, the mind through imagination cultivates few more desires. And these cultivated desires become a lot which causes another birth. So this is, therefore this Swamiji says here in the first paragraph that it's meant for purgation of existing desire. Instead he is gathering new ones. And therefore the cycle of birth and death repeats. It is never at rest for the jiva. Because of the ignorant jiva, he cultivates few more desires, and these cultivated desires becomes a cause for another birth. And this is in addition to the already the cycle of birth and death. Already there is a Sanchita karma, of which one lot is taken out from Sanchita karma, which becomes Prarabdha karma for the present life. When this life is over, another lot from Sanchita karma would come. This is the existing system. But now this fellow adds to it another cultivated few more desires. Now, this is not meant in the system. This is something additional. Therefore, additional life is booked by this individual. One more life is booked by the individual to clear his cultivated desire. So this is how normally happens. Like we are going in the market because we want to buy something which is required, necessary. We go out and in the bargain, we buy few more things which were not necessary. But because we saw it and daily seeing it, it has cultivated a liking for it. Then the liking has become a desire, and thus we are cultivating new desire. So desire, now like we have seen that a desire for a color TV is not there in that remote village with a villager. It is there for those who have got the showrooms on the roads, and they are day in and day out, they are seeing the demo of these TVs, etc. Therefore, seeing daily, imagining, thus processing that, it has cultivated one more desire for a TV. So likewise, we are en route cultivating more desires, and this lot of more desire is responsible for another birth. Therefore, first of all, ignorant. There is a lot of vasanas, the Sanchita karma. Therefore, already he is subject to birth and death, and this is added or continued. The wheel of birth and death is never at rest. Never at rest. It is running. The present job, present life is meant for that only. But the fellow, due to his ignorance plus the wrong habits, he cultivates few more desires, and thus he adds to it. This is how we are trying to understand this first paragraph. And another is here, having covered this, now we go to the next sentence. We come here for purgation, but due to our ignorance of the way and the goal, the extrovertedness in us compels us to get ourselves attached to the object which have a beauty and a charm created by the imaginations of our mind, Maya at work. Now here further, instead of forgetting the existing desires, due to ignorance of what? Not our true nature, that already it is taken for granted now. The jiva means the ignorant fellow of his true nature. Now it is ignorance of the way and the goal. Yes, can anyone comment on this? Ignorance of the way, which way and which goal? Because of the ignorance of the way and the goal, the extrovertedness in us compels us to get ourselves attached to the objects. So what? When one gets attached to the object, then what? Yes.
ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः संगस्तोषुपजायते
Further.
संगात् जायते कामः कामात् क्रोधो भिजायते
No,
क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः
Okay. Sanga Sangat Jayate Kamaha. Because attachment to the object gives rise to desire. Isn't it? Sangasteshu upajayate, Sangat Sanjayate Kama. We are concerned only with this. When one is attached to the objects, a desire for them arises in his mind. So the attachment to make the objects attractive and make the fellow attached to it is the work of Maya. So here it is written Maya at work. So once the fellow is attached to it, then it follows that he will entertain the desire and he will get into that process of desire fulfillment, get stuck up there, etc. Well, we'll not waste our time in finding out what is the way and the goal, because Swamiji will explain it in the next paragraph. So we'll proceed. But look out for, keep in mind, we need the explanation of the way and the goal. As such, if you see this para itself, first para that we are discussing, you will find the way to exhaust the vasanas, and goal is to discover our true nature as pure consciousness. This should be the way. What is the way to exhaust the vasanas? This is not the way. Imagination, cultivation, adding to the existing vasanas. That's not the way. How the way to exhaust the vasana is different, and the goal to be reached to end the vasana is not the goal. It is the preliminary requirement to reach the goal. So these two aspects are there, and now we will see the in second and third para we will see the details of that. Now, is there anything left out in this? That was the second part of the para. So we have covered the first para. Is there anything that one would like to discuss further? The process is, we have discussed this process several times with the reference to Gita and other Prakran Granthas. Therefore, it's not very difficult to understand. So we proceed to the second para. We come with our own vasanas into vasanas playing crisscross, which is the world of objects and beings, the actual field of man's endeavor to live up to the sahaja vasana and to exhaust them through actions undertaken without ego and egocentric desires, aham, mama, so that no new vasanas may precipitate in us, is really the way into inverted commas. That's the way that was referred earlier. So how to exhaust the vasanas? The way to exhaust the vasanas is described here clearly. To live up to the sahaja vasanas. That's our nature. First nature is our vasanas. Second nature is our pure consciousness. So we have got these two natures. One is called Swabhavaha, another is called Swarupa. So Vasana is our Swabhava. We are behaving to fulfill, attend and fulfill the Vasanas. So that is our Swabhava. Swabhavaha Duratikramaha is a statement. One cannot really change one's Swabhava because it is based on these Vasanas. So Swabhava and Swarupa, these are the two different things. So Swadharme Nidanam Shreyaha, their Swadharma is Swabhava. And Swadharme Nidanam Shreya means to fulfill one's own vasanas, though difficult, is better and is recommended than trying to fulfill or cultivate somebody else's vasanas and trying to fulfill them successfully. Instead of that, even if you fail, but we need to fulfill our own sahaja vasanas and not cultivate somebody else's vasanas and trying to fulfill them. So always we will come across this and we need to discriminate between the sahaja vasana and cultivated vasanas. We are concerned with sahaja vasana. We should fulfill them and exhaust them and make our within clean and pure. So this is the way of karma yoga basically in exhausting the vasanas. And that's why the aham, mama, etc. without ego and egocentric desires, these are all descriptions of karma yoga. To live up to the sahaja vasanas and to exhaust them through actions undertaken without ego and egocentric desires. If suppose we undertake the exhaustion of desires through ego and egocentric desires, then what will happen? What is the problem? It's always this is a clause without ego and egocentric desire. What will happen?
With egocentric desires, that will be a multiplication of asana.
Oh, so it will give rise to more vasana.
Many more vasanas. But without ego, it is a sahaja vasana which will, by nature, it will exhaust.
Yes.
But there will not be any addition of vasana.
Yeah, it will have its own natural course and it will get exhausted. Correct. So that's why without aham and mama, so that no new vasanas may precipitate in us, and that is really the way. By all means, act and achieve. What is the sense behind the word achieve? Act is all right. Just now it is said how to act and exhaust the vasanas.
This is achievement of the goal.
Very good. The first one, act, is to act in such a way that only existing vasanas will be exhausted without creating any new one. And achievement is when the vasanas are exhausted, we will be aware of pure consciousness, which is our nature, and that is achievement. To achievement of something already achieved. The consciousness is already there. Not that it is to be newly achieved, but it is the achievement when we are conscious of consciousness. as our nature. Okay. Anything else you see? Now Swamiji reports some words. But let your actions be in an attitude of dedication. Mai sanyasya. Can you recall any words related to this in Gita? Only 2 words are given, which are the part of the words.
Mai sanyasya matparaha ananyenaiva yogena mam dhyayate.
No.
No?
No.
Mayyeva
Mai
mana.
sanyasya is not to be. This is not to be taken together. Mai sanyasya is not one after the other. That is why you have taken that and you remember the other word. What is to be sanyasya? Mai sanyasya what?
That work is done, but in the mind, the performer dedicates the work to the Lord.
Do you remember the word which is including this wording? Mai and sanyasya.
Mayyeva mana adasva mai buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayyeva atrodvam. In that also mai and this word comes.
What is that? Mai, please repeat.
Mayyeva mana adasva mai buddhim niveshaya.
Niveshaya. Nivasishyasi mayyeva. Where is the sanyasya has come?
Sanyasya is not there.
मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्याध्यात्म चेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युद्धस्व विगतज्वरः. 3rd chapter. How to perform actions according to Karma Yoga. मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि मयि सन्न्यस्य मत्पराः निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा, etc. This verse is about 3rd chapter and 30 or 30. I'll read that. OS chapter 3, 30. मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्याध्यात्म चेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विगतज्वरः. This, in fact, it is one word defines what is Karma Yoga. So the first Sarvani Karmani Mai Sanyasya. So Mai and Sanyasa 2 are referred here in the bracket, but they don't come immediately one after the other. Mai Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa Sanyasya Nirashir Nirmamo Bhutva, then Yudhyasva Vigatajvaraha. So Vigatajvaraha are the excitements in the present, feverish excitements in the present, Jvaraha. Then the worries of the past and anxieties for the future, etc. is also covered. Nirashihi is concerned with the future. Nirmamaha related to the past. Then Yuddhasva, Vigatajvaraha in the present, excitement in the present. So this is the word, Mai Sarvani Karmani, and this is a representative word. In short, summarizes the entire Karma Yoga. Mai Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa. Okay, so here, so Swamiji in short defines this Karma Yoga, the spirit of Yajna, Yajna Bhava, then idea of Loka Sangraha, Mai Sanyasya. These are all ideas for Karma Yoga. So instead of karma bringing in new vasanas, more vasanas, here the karma is to be performed in such a way is the part that existing vasanas are exhausted, no new vasanas are formed. This is how the technique is conveyed in this particular words. This is third chapter, 30th verse. Okay. Anything else with the idea to serve Lokasangra in a spirit of Yajna Bhava, says Gita. Therefore, we have to refer to Gita chapter 3 and 3. Gita chapter 3 being dealing with Karma Yoga. Yes, any further point to be discussed? Is nothing difficult. So the way we have, Swamiji has defined way to exhaust the existing vasanas without forming new vasanas. This is the way. Karma Yoga is the way. Okay. So now we can proceed to the next para. Third para. Thus, when the existing vasanas are reduced, mind you the term, reduced, the thought disturbances calm down, and that's when the subtle body, mind and intellect dies a mystic death, meaning it is transcended the experiences of infinite spirit. Small para, almost one sentence only. Thus, when the existing vasanas are reduced, the thought disturbances calm down, and thus when the subtle body dies a mystic death, meaning it is transcended the experiences of the infinite spirit. What is this all about? One para, one sentence. Quick.
The existing vasanas are the sahaja vasanas which will be exhausted. There won't be any multiplication of vasanas, so there won't be any disturbances in the mind. So more the mind is calm and quiet. It is a perfect medium for the spirit to manifest, because when there are no vasanas, the mind and intellect, there are no thoughts. The mind is in that thoughtless state, which is a perfect medium for manifestation of spirit.
Correct. So now you have only explained what is mentioned there. I am asking, what exactly Swamiji is trying to define through this? It is a step-by-step presentation of the point. What we have at the end of first para is being discussed in second and third. Clue number 1. So what is discussed here in third para? What is discussed in second para?
Second para, the way is discussed. Third para,
Now,
the goal is discussed.
now in the third para, what is discussed?
Goal.
Goal. Finish. That's the way. That's the right answer. So see now how systematically in the first para at the closing says, but due to our ignorance of the way and the goal, the words are introduced. Then the word way is taken up in the next para for explanation. Then the goal is taken up for next. See, this is a logical thought development. Once the ideas are introduced, then they are explained. So the way and the goal is introduced in the first para. The way is explained in the second, and the goal is explained in the third. Very logically and step-by-step presentation and thus achieving thought development. So how the thought is developed? Now it is only described as Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, etc. But what does that mean? Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi, the wheel of birth and death. Why it is not at rest for the Jiva? And how, what is the mistake committed by Jiva in ignorance? And how it causes more birth. He provides the material for the more birth by his ignorance. So all that is very systematically developed. Otherwise, to comment on this Punarapijanam, what would you comment? Do you describe the different births and deaths? No. The cause for birth and death is being described. It is the ignorance about the way and the goal, way to exhaust vasanas, and having exhausted the vasanas to reach the goal. This is exactly is being commented. This all commentary is only on first two lines. Punarapi jananyam, punarapi maranam. Still the commentary is going on. So now that was third para about the goal. Now let us see what fourth para has to offer. Thereafter, since there are no vasanas in the individual, there are no thoughts in him, and so no subtle body to claim a new embodiment to function in any fresh environment. The cause for all repeated births thus totally cease. So far is all expounding the way to stop this unending cycle of birth and death. Swamiji is developing the thought and fulfilling it by how we can stop this wheel of birth and death. It is difficult for the jiva on his own to stop this because he is in ignorance, he is adding to it instead of exhausting it. So the proper way of exhausting the vasana, a karma yoga method, and then the description how the goal is achieved in the third para. Now, in the third para itself, I want to draw your attention to the first statement. Thus, when the existing vasanas are reduced, it is not said existing vasanas are exhausted. It is not necessary to exhaust all vasanas. And I've heard many people talking or repeating the statement made in the Yatneshala. Unless the vasanas are exhausted, there is no question of self-realization. So unless and until, etc., these statements are not workable. So unless the vasanas are over, there is no hope for the liberation or self-realization. If you say like this, then how do you know whether the vasanas are exhausted? It's only the present not exhausted is not the vasanas all exhausted. We have in Sanchita vasanas, in store we have got certain vasanas still to be fulfilled. How can you claim that all vasanas are exhausted? Therefore, it is not said that the vasanas are exhausted, but here it is said that vasanas are reduced. Now I want you to recall the example we have taken, illustration we have taken, in which we have said that it's not necessary to exhaust, but reduction is sufficient. Reducing is enough. For what? To reach the goal. What? We have taken
Example of water bed. Water is reduced and very clear so that we can see water bed that much transparent. In that,
very
the
good.
Light from the sky.
Correct. You're perfect in recalling the statement. In the rainy season, the small rivulets, etc., they overflow with dirty water and lot of turbulence because of the rains, the falling on the mountains, they gather the speed, momentum, and the water comes with force and also with current. And this is too much in quantum. So a lot of water goes. There is no chance of seeing the river bed. Now the water represents the changing aspect in our life. Body, mind, intellect, all subject to change. Similarly, the water, no drop of water is permanently stable. It is keeps on moving continuously. That is the flowing water. And waters can flow over that which does not flow, and that is riverbed. Riverbed, because it is stationary, the water can flow over it. That is one thing. Now, what is not changing is riverbed. Riverbed, the river does not flow along with the riverbed. Riverbed is stationary, while only waters of the river flows. So, what is changing is water. What is not changing is riverbed. So, the changeless reality, the riverbed, can be realized, for which it is not necessary that all water should be exhausted, so that the riverbed is exposed. It is not necessary. First of all, the dirt and the turbulence goes away the moment the quantity is reduced. And slowly, when the dirt has gone, then there is a clean, pure water, quite transparent. And so when the water quantity is reduced, so that it is very close to the river bed, that crystal clear, pure water, we can see through that water, the river bed. Therefore, it's not necessary. So the sattvic vasanas, and that too also in a minimum quantity, will enable us to see the consciousness. Because the sattva is the perfect medium for consciousness to manifest. As the little water which is pure, without disturbance, it is flowing very close to the river bed, and there is no current, basically there is no movement, as though it is stilled. Water is still, but it is flowing in a very slow speed, and being pure, you can see through the riverbed. Riverbed is the reality which is not subject to change, whereas the changing aspect is appearance, not the real. So this is here it is, when vasanas are reduced, the thought disturbances calm down. So here we can say, when the tamasic and rajasic vasanas are reduced and sattvic vasanas are cultivated, then the sattvic vasanas become a fit medium, that is transparent, for the consciousness to manifest. Right? So that is the idea behind this. So now, before commenting upon the existing stanza, present stanza, he has not commented upon Punarapi Jananam. Here Samsare Bahudustare, not commented so far. Before he comments about the main contents of the verse, he has really, by our good luck and his grace, he has exhaustively explained how to get rid of vasanas and how to experience the revealed nature of ours as pure consciousness. So this is he has put before us a complete plan by which the seeker can first of all find a way to exhaust his desire, and then the goal to manifest our true nature. This is not there in the verse, please note. It is not suggested in that how do we go about it. Swamiji on his own, he has explained exhaustively the main science of how to exhaust the vasanas and how to reach the goal. In short, And after presenting it, now he is commenting on Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, which is not very difficult to understand. So the fifth para goes about. The sixth para will see the problem in this. What is the problem? Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, and how the individual is helpless and is seeking the Lord's help. So all this is in the balance portion of the commentary, so which we will discuss next time, the balance part. But the main part we have covered is, which is not there in the words, but Swamiji on his own has commented on how to exhaust vasanas and how to reach the goal, that is realization of our true nature. And that's a very essential gain from this verse. Though verse is not spelling it in that sense, wording are different, but Swamiji has taken it up as another opportunity to comment on the way and the goal. Way to exhaust vasanas and goal to reach one's own true nature. We'll stop here. Is there any announcement? Yes.
No announcement.
Okay. So then we will have prayer. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityormamritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om, sir.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.